Stop right there, because what is moving around your life is not random, and it is not asking your permission anymore. You have been feeling a strange pressure in your chest, a pause in your steps, and a quiet refusal in places that used to feel easy. I'm speaking to you because the warning has already begun, and if you stay with me, you will recognize the signs, the pattern beneath them, the moment the hidden trap loses its cover, the practice that brings you back to yourself, and the words that will be sealed over your life before this ends. You have been waking with that inward weight still resting on your body, as if the night did not finish its work. You sit on the edge of the bed, look at the phone, and feel that even the silence is trying to tell you something. The room looks ordinary, the light is the same, the clock is the same, but your breathing is not. Your shoulders know it before your mind admits it, and your hands hesitate before they touch what used to be automatic. You are not imagining that tension, because the body often notices before the mouth has courage. The old pace no longer fits the inside of you. The conversation you once entered without thinking now feels thin, and the noise around you starts to sound like a room with a cracked wall. What is happening is not weakness, and it is not your spirit failing. It is the moment when what was covered begins to press back through the fabric of normal days. Something is being revealed in the places you used to ignore, and your discomfort is carrying more meaning than your fear wants to admit. You are not being punished by the unease that has followed you into ordinary moments. You are being prepared to see what was invisible while you were still moving too quickly to notice it. The message is not that everything will change at once, but that the truth is already working underneath what you can control. There are 3 things you will recognize before this ends. The signs that keep repeating in your routine, the pattern that has been quietly shaping your choices, and the next obedient step that does not need to be dramatic to be real. You will also understand why the silence has felt so heavy, why certain doors have stayed closed, and why some delays have not carried the same pain they used to carry. You may have thought the delay meant denial. Attention, you need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life. A guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you, and strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10 Zuru readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who are tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment. But the deeper layer is that delay can become protection when it keeps you from stepping forward before your heart is ready. The room around you has been teaching you. The phone in your hand has been teaching you. And even the unanswered message has been teaching you. Nothing about this is accidental. What feels like interruption may be the first mercy you have received in a long time. You know the kind of morning I mean. The one where you wake before the alarm and stare into the dimness as if the day is already speaking before you. The cup on the kitchen counter, the chair pulled out slightly, the unclosed window, the laundry basket near the hall. All of it can carry a strange weight when your inner life is no longer in agreement with your routine. You move through the house and sense that something is off, not because the furniture changed, but because your spirit stopped pretending. That is why even small things can feel louder now, and why a simple conversation can leave you tired in a way that seems too deep for the moment. You may hear yourself think, "This does not feed me anymore," and the sentence feels almost like a confession. It is a holy kind of exhaustion when the old atmosphere no longer nourishes you. The closed door, the delayed answer, the silence after effort, these are not always refusals. Sometimes they are the first edge of discernment returning to its proper place. And when discernment returns, comfort does not always stay. A real shift in you often begins as a quiet discomfort before it becomes a clear direction. You are the one who feels the weight more sharply because you have been noticing what others walk past. That sensitivity is not a flaw in you, and it is not a sign that you were made to live uneasy. It is often the mark of a conscience that refuses to stay asleep when the atmosphere changes. You may sit in a familiar chair and still feel that the room no longer carries the same permission it once did. You may be standing in the shower with water running over your shoulders and realize that your thoughts are no longer circling around the same old explanations. Your body is participating in the message, not just your mind. There is a kind of inner stillness that arrives when confusion loses its authority, and that stillness is not empty. It is a signal that something in you has begun to separate from what used to rule it. You were not made to keep shrinking just because shrinking once kept you safe. The old role no longer fits cleanly. What once looked like peace may now be appearing as disappearance, and the difference matters. The pressure around you has not only been emotional, because distraction has been arriving right when clarity begins to sharpen. You sit down to pray and suddenly remember 3 errands, 2 messages, and a task that could have waited all day. You try to listen inwardly, and the day starts speaking in a dozen smaller urgencies that pretend to be important. That is one of the oldest strategies of confusion. To fill the room until your own stillness feels inconvenient. Your chest tightens before you answer the wrong message, and your breath shortens when you are pulled back toward a pace that does not belong to you anymore. Fear can dress itself as wisdom, and urgency can imitate obedience, but your body already knows the difference. The tension is not there to torment you. It is there to reveal where you have been trained to overgive. Every unnecessary demand that steals your peace is trying to keep you from hearing what is now true. You are being invited to stop letting the loudest voice in the room define your direction. What is real does not need to shout to remain real, and what is right does not need to hurry to prove itself. When you think back, you can see that this has happened before in smaller ways, almost like a pattern of doors that opened only after you stopped forcing them. You may remember a season when you kept explaining yourself to people who had already decided not to understand. You may remember how your throat tightened before you spoke, as if your body knew that too much of your life was being spent on translation. That is why the current pressure feels so familiar. It is not because the same mistake is being repeated, but because the same lesson is asking to be completed. This is not about blame, and it is not about shame. The root is often a survival pattern that once protected you, staying small to keep peace, staying quiet to avoid conflict, staying agreeable so you would not be left behind. Such patterns can begin as mercy in one season and become a prison in another. The cost of staying inside them is not always visible at first, but it slowly drains your clarity. When your spirit keeps agreeing to less than it knows is true, peace becomes thinner and thinner, and you begin to sense that the problem is not only what is around you, but what has been trained inside you. There is a biblical echo in this, and it is not distant from your life. Joseph did not begin with visibility. He began in hidden places where the promise had to survive misunderstanding. David was not first seen in the field of honor, but in the quiet where his hands were already learning faithfulness. Their stories are not decorations for your pain. They are mirrors for your process. You have had moments where you felt overlooked while still being formed, and those moments have not been wasted. The same God who does not rush the root also does not abandon the branch. When you stand in your own kitchen, looking at the dish you are washing, or when you sit in your car before going inside and feel the weight in your chest, that hidden formation is still at work. The surface of your life may look unchanged, but the deeper layer is moving. You are not late just because the visible fruit has not appeared yet. The root has its own timeline, and it has been protected from your impatience for a reason. What happens if you ignore the signal is not dramatic in the way fear likes to imagine, but it is costly in quieter ways. You keep saying yes to the same pressure, and slowly your peace becomes background noise. You keep forcing a pace that your spirit no longer blesses, and your body begins to carry the protest. You tell yourself that nothing is wrong, but then you feel tired after ordinary conversations that used to leave you unchanged. You smile, respond, continue, and yet something in you keeps standing behind the scene, asking to be noticed. That inner question is not rebellion. It is a warning that sensitivity is trying to stay alive in you. If you keep calling the warning a problem, you may miss the mercy hidden inside it. There is a reason the door has felt closed and the path has felt narrow. What is not for you cannot remain peaceful in you for long, and what is for you will not require you to abandon yourself to reach it. If even one of these signs has landed in you, if your shoulders have dropped at any point while hearing this, type 888 in the comments and then come back to me. That code is a quiet confirmation, a small way of saying that recognition has touched you and that the signal was heard. It is not a game, and it is not a performance. It is a witness that something in you answered. Write it as a sign that the hidden pressure is not invisible anymore, and let that simple agreement settle in the place where your first resistance lived. You do not need to explain the whole story in that moment. You only need to acknowledge that the message found you, then return here, because what is underneath the signs is about to become clearer. The surface has spoken enough for now. The deeper layer is waiting, and it has been shaping you more than you realized. The conflict is not only around you, because a deeper question has been sitting beneath the noise. You know that uneasy place where you keep asking whether you are being cautious or merely afraid. You know the moment when your mind keeps offering reasons to delay what your spirit has already recognized. That inner split is where the next truth begins. You may be standing at the sink, rinsing a cup, and suddenly aware that your hesitation has become a habit. You may be staring at a message thread and realizing that the pressure to answer immediately is not peace, but control, wearing a polite face. Your body feels the conflict before your language can name it. The mind explains, the body resists, and the spirit keeps returning to the same quiet point. This is why the issue is not only discernment about a door, but discernment about what inside you has been trained to run toward urgency. The deeper layer is not trying to shame you. It is trying to free you from the habit of calling fear by a noble name. The root has often been approval hunger. Even if you have never used those words aloud, you learn to read faces before you learn to trust your own pace. You learned to soften your voice so nobody would accuse you of being difficult, and that softness became a pattern that followed you into rooms where you should have been more certain. It can feel noble to keep the peace, but peace is not the same thing as disappearing. Somewhere along the way, you may have started believing that being useful would keep you safe, and being quiet would keep you loved. That belief can survive for years because it looks like maturity from the outside. Inside, though, it slowly makes your own voice feel negotiable. This is not condemnation, because survival patterns are learned under pressure. They are not your identity. But they do become a trap when they continue after the season that formed them has already ended. What once preserved you can now restrain you. You can see the war between mind, body, and spirit in the small moments that nobody applauds. The mind says you are overthinking. The body says something in this room is draining me. And the spirit says, wait, There is more here than you can see yet. The mind wants a quick answer, the body wants relief, and the spirit wants truth. That is why the nervousness you feel before a decision is not always a sign of weakness. Sometimes it is the body refusing to call a false path safe. You may hear yourself say, "Why does this feel so heavy?" And the answer is not always that you are broken. Sometimes the heaviness is a signal that something no longer belongs to your future. There is a difference between anxiety that spins and discernment that steadies. One throws you into chaos. The other asks you to slow down so you can hear clearly. The old voice in you says, "Hurry." The wiser voice says, "Wait long enough to know what is being returned." Some rooms do not resist because they are evil. They resist because they require you to shrink in order to fit. You feel that in the way your shoulders draw in when you enter, in the way your laugh changes shape, in the way your own truth becomes smaller to make the atmosphere easier for everyone else. Not every difficult room is a trap, but some rooms reveal the cost of old survival. You may notice that certain conversations leave you more tired than honest work. You may notice that some people only seem comfortable when you are less yourself. That does not mean you must become suspicious of everybody. It means you must become honest about what drains you. Discernment is not paranoia. It is the courage to recognize what asks you to betray your own clarity. When you keep calling every drain normal, the day becomes heavier than it should be. But when you stop pretending, you begin to recover your own boundaries. The strategy of opposition is rarely dramatic at first. It arrives through little delays, little diversions, little reasons to postpone what would bring peace. You open the phone to pray and then find yourself checking something useless because your attention has been trained to scatter. You sit down to think clearly and another voice says there is no time. Answer now, decide now, move now. That false urgency is not urgency at all. It is pressure designed to keep you from noticing the gate. The more noise fills the day, the more difficult it becomes to hear the still place where truth is standing. Sometimes the opposition does not deny the call. It only keeps you too busy to answer it well. You are learning that peace can be crowded out by noise that calls itself responsibility. That is why your pause is not laziness. It is resistance to a pattern that wants to rush you out of yourself. The trap begins where reflection is treated like waste. And yet, there comes a point where the pattern can no longer hide behind your excuses. You stop negotiating with the voice that keeps asking you to betray your own knowing. You recognize that peace has been trying to return, but you keep confusing its quietness with a lack of direction. The truth is sharper than that. You're not being asked to rush into a new identity. You are being asked to stop pretending the old one still fits. There is a moment when your chest loosens because the lie loses its power. And you know, even before words, that the threshold has been reached. That threshold is not a spectacle. It is a line drawn inside your conscience. You do not cross it by force, you cross it by agreement. What has been underneath the noise is now visible enough to name, and the naming is already a kind of release. The room cannot keep you smaller forever once you have seen the door. Picture a scroll sealed before the right hour, resting on a table where no one has the authority to open it too soon. That is what your season has felt like, even if you called it confusion. The seal has not been there to punish you, but to preserve what would have been damaged by being exposed too early. You have stood near the table, looked at the edges of what you were meant to carry, and wondered why the hand had not yet moved. The answer is not hidden anymore. Timing has been part of the mercy. There are words that cannot be read until the right hour, and there are assignments that cannot be entered until the heart can hold them without distortion. You may have wanted the scroll open before the whole room was ready to understand it, but the seal has protected the meaning. The hiddenness was not absence, it was containment. Your life has not been empty just because it has been covered. Something has been waiting under that cover with intention. The sealed thing has memory, and that is important for you to hear. A scroll knows it is not blank simply because it is closed. It carries every line even while it waits. In the same way, you have not lost what was written over your life just because you could not yet read it. When you stand in a hallway and feel that strange pause before entering the next room, you are standing near that same kind of seal. The old habit would be to force the opening, to demand the timing, to pull at what has not yet yielded. But force breaks what reverence prepares. The seal is not humiliation. It is shelter. It keeps the message from being reduced to the level of your panic. That is why your frustration has not been able to erase the quiet certainty under it. The scroll remembers. You remember too, even if only in fragments. And memory itself is becoming a form of guidance. The opposition has tried to make you believe that hiddenness means nothing is happening. That is the lie that drains endurance. The truth is that hiddenness often means the thing is still intact. You may feel the pressure of waiting, but pressure is not proof of emptiness. Sometimes it is the proof that something inside is under care. The sealed scroll does not shout, yet it carries a future line by line. You have lived through moments where the outside looked still while the inside was being preserved. You may have mistaken quiet for delay, but quiet was keeping the words from being stolen by the wrong hands. That is why your own inner life has become more selective. Certain voices no longer sound trustworthy, even when they sound polished. Your spirit is learning to distinguish between what is merely loud and what is actually authorized. The difference is saving you from unnecessary damage. And when you finally stop trying to force what was meant to be opened gently, you begin to honor the timing that preserved you. You can feel the scroll in the ordinary act of reaching for the morning light. Before the sun fully settles on the window, there is a pause where everything is still covered, and yet the room is already changing. That is the moment your life has entered. Not the dramatic opening, but the first breath of movement under the seal. Your hands may still feel hesitant, but the hesitation is different now. It is no longer confusion. It is reverence meeting readiness. There is a quiet strength in waiting without panic, and that strength is becoming yours. The old fear that you missed your chance is losing its voice. The sealed thing was never dead. It was simply held for the proper hour. And when that hour arrives, the opening does not feel like chaos. It feels like recognition. Something in you leans forward because it already knows the shape of what is coming. Right now, the scroll begins to loosen in ways you can almost feel before you can explain them. The edge that once resisted is giving way to attention. The paper does not tear. It releases. You may notice it in a softer breath, in a slower answer, in the way your body no longer agrees with rushing. That is movement. That is the covered thing becoming readable. And because it is moving, I need you to do one simple thing now. Write eu vejo isso in the comments, and then come back to me. Those words are not magic, they are recognition. They say that the seal has been seen at the moment it began to open. They make the witness permanent, where hesitation used to live. Write them, and let the seeing settle into you. Then return here, because the opening is not the end of the story. It is the doorway into return. The return is not a performance, and it is not a new version of striving. It is the quiet decision to come back to what was true before fear taught you to live at a distance from yourself. You may be sitting in your car before going inside, feeling the weight of the day on your shoulders and realizing that you no longer need to explain your way back into peace. You may open a message thread and stop yourself from answering too quickly, because a response given in fear is not the same as a response given in freedom. This is how return begins, not with noise, but with restraint. The old pattern wants you to overcommit, over-explain, over-carry, and over-prove. The new way asks you to pause long enough to know what is yours. That is not passivity, that is stewardship. When you stop feeding the false urgency, you begin to hear the real assignment. What is being returned to you is not merely calm. It is the ability to live without leaving yourself behind. One practice marks that return in the morning, and it is simple enough to fit in a quiet room before the day begins. Before you reach for anything else, speak one short sentence that seals your attention, and let the first breath of the day belong to truth rather than pressure. You do not need a ceremony with noise. You need a threshold pause. Stand near the edge of the day and refuse to cross into it while still carrying someone else's confusion. That small act can steady the whole inner frame. You are not trying to force an outcome. You are setting the order of your heart. The body learns quickly when the morning begins in peace. Breath slows, shoulders drop, and the day loses some of its power to command you. What seems small becomes foundational because it keeps the sealed scroll from being handled by panic. And that changes what kind of listener you are as the day unfolds. A second practice belongs to the moment when something pulls at your peace and asks for an immediate answer. Before you respond, check whether the request expands your spirit or drains it. That is your peace audit, and it is more honest than your hurry. Some things do not deserve your immediate yes, even if they sound important. Some messages are not emergencies, they are invitations to abandon your own center. When you give yourself a breath before answering, you are not being difficult. You are refusing to confuse pressure with authority. The room may expect you to move quickly, but your peace has the right to speak first. This is how the closed door becomes wisdom instead of frustration. This is how the scroll remains protected while you learn to read your own pace. The practice is simple, but it changes what can enter you. And what can enter you is shaping what can stay. There is protection in these limits, and you need to hear that clearly. A closed door is not always a rejection, because sometimes it keeps your steps from landing where your spirit would be diminished. A delayed answer is not always punishment, because sometimes it keeps your courage from being spent before it is needed. You have already lived through enough to know that not every open path is a good path. The fear in you may have called every restriction a loss, but mercy often wears the face of limitation. When you can no longer go farther in a direction that used to feel normal, it may be because that road cannot carry your future. Protection does not always feel soft at first. Sometimes it feels like interruption, but interruption can be holy when it stops you before the trap becomes a routine. You are learning to trust the pause more than the panic. That trust is part of your return. And return also asks for a quieter kind of courage, the courage to stop over-explaining what God has already clarified in your spirit. You do not have to defend every boundary to people who only respect your exhaustion. You do not have to narrate every decision for those who were never meant to carry it with you. The more you keep trying to convince everyone, the more energy leaks from the place that should be nourished. Stewardship means protecting what has been returned. It means handling the newly opened thing with gentleness instead of drama. It means saying no to the forces that profit from your confusion. There is power in a calm yes, and there is wisdom in a clean no. Your life does not need a louder voice to become more truthful. It needs a truer one. That truer voice is what the silence has been waiting to make audible. At some point, the return becomes visible in the room itself. The chair no longer feels like a place of defeat. The phone no longer feels like a trap every time it lights up. The hallway no longer feels like a place where you must rehearse your role before entering. You are beginning to live from a center that does not require constant performance. That is why the body starts to relax in ways that surprise you. A breath comes easier. The shoulders stop holding every unfinished sentence. The stomach no longer twists at every delay. What you once called heaviness is being replaced by discernment, and discernment is lighter because it is true. When the return is real, you stop chasing the atmosphere and begin carrying a steadier one. That change does not make you superior, it makes you settled, and settled is holy when it is born from truth. I want you to let your like be your amen without words if this has confirmed what your spirit already knew. Not as a metric and not as performance, but as agreement that the message found the right place in you. A simple gesture can mean, I heard it, I received it, I do know. Attention, you need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life. A guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you, and strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10 Zuru readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who are tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment.